quick, something's in my mind, and it's completely different
Do you
from.
want
And then we'll go into.
You look cold.
No, I'm fine. I was thinking about the Hillary Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, and I was wondering what happened to it, and then I was wondering about the Trump Foundation. Why is it that when Hillary left office, her foundation shut down?
I don't think it's
And
shut
when
down.
Trump-
I think it still exists.
When Trump entered the private sector, his foundation shut down. In other words, like when Hillary was in office, the foundation was running strong, and when okay, go ahead.
I believe the Clinton Foundation is still in business.
Oh, okay. Then
I believe, because according to 2 minutes of research I did 2 weeks ago. But the Trump Foundation got shut down for not being a real charity. They weren't being charity. They were doing all this shit. And not only did they get shut down, but the Trump kids have to take classes in how not to be a fraudulent charity or something like that.
Oh.
Okay, well, I don't know about that, but I know that the Clinton Foundation went from getting hundreds of millions of donations when she was in office or had a chance to become president to getting practically none. So the Clinton Foundation is defunct.
I don't think it's defunct. I
Yeah.
think it's still
It
chugs along.
may exist in name, but their funding has gone down to practically nothing. And the reason is because when Clinton was in office, she was doing everything she could to sell America to whoever would pay for it. She was completely dishonest, and she was influence peddling. So that's why they don't get so many. The reason that, okay, it is a strange coincidence that after Clinton lost the election, contributions to the Clinton Foundation basically became next to nothing.
That's not, I mean, it's not fucking, I mean, but anyway, we don't need to argue about
Went
it.
from hundreds of millions to next to
I don't know,
nothing.
probably tens of millions. Okay.
No. People are hardly contributing to it anymore.
All right, so what's the next thing?
Do you want to do? Let's take a break. Yeah.
Okay.
We've gone like.
Okay, so let's renew Science Corner for a sec. I and a bunch of people, other people, think that the universe is made of information because quantum mechanics is pretty much a theory of incomplete information. It's a complete theory of what happens when you have incomplete information in a system. And also when you get down to fundamental particles, they are really fucking fundamental when you get down to the most fundamental, like electrons. There's not much to them. They're just very, they can only take a couple values of a couple variables. They seem like there's just nothing there. Protons, they have more structure. There's much more going on, inside a proton and inside an atomic nucleus. But like electrons are just super, like little twists in space. There's just nothing to them. And when you get down to stuff that has nothing going on, that stuff feels like information. If something can only take the value 0 or 1, and that's all there is to it, that's information. However, I kind of suspect the universe is made of information not the way the information in a computer is contained in a computer. In a computer, you have a bunch of circuitry that can take, values of 0 or 1. And each one of those values that this computer that has a gig or a terabyte or a petabyte of information somewhere fucking in it, each one of those little points that's taken on a certain value has a specific meaning. That it has to do with the color of a pixel in a video game, or what to do when you're trying to add 17 and 47, or some part of that mathematical operation. I suspect that the universe doesn't that information isn't as tightly assigned to each little bit, each little element, each little particle in the universe. Now, I think protons or proton-electron pairs are little correlation engines. They're kind of variables. I don't know, the way, say, if you've taken a stats class, you know about like graphing relationships along a number of different axes. The XYZ axes, and you like if you're trying to correlate, say, height and weight, or like family wealth and SAT scores, you're going to end up with a scatter graph that is graphing the relationship among 2 variables or 3 variables, or 11 or whatever variables. And I believe that the protons kind of have a correlative function, that like if you have 2 variables that tend to behave the same way, those variables may become locked together in 2 protons may come together and fuse into a proton-neutron deuterium nucleus, which means you have 2 protony things locked together. One of them is now a neutron, but they have roughly the same mass. And now they're just tied together where goeth the one proton, the neutrons dragged along. So they're correlated. They're stuck together. The way, like parental income and SAT scores are highly correlated, except in the case of a nucleus, you got 2 things that are almost perfectly correlated. So there's information there that these 2 protons came together, and now they're stuck together as a proton-neutron pair in a deuterium nucleus. And it could get together with another proton-neutron pair and become a helium nucleus, which has 2 protons. You got 4 of these proton-neutrons things locked together in a nucleus. But I don't think I think there's a possibility that the information in that, that's contained in the correlation of these 4 things is as precisely delineated as a circuit either being a 1 or a 0 in a computer. I feel like everything's a little fuzzier. The way, you can make shit out of clay, the way Lance does, and clay has all this flexibility, versus making shit out of Legos where everything's definite and or what's Minecraft? The whole world's out of Minecraft elements. I feel like there's a more slidey, kind of holographically contained information. The universe contains information on all sorts of scales. That matter is clumped together into stars, and stars are clumped together into galaxies, and galaxies are clumped together into superclusters and filaments and all. And all that clumping is like a map of correlations. But I kind of think there's enough slop in the correlations that the universe can have information that's meaningful to the universe itself, and the universe can have information that's meaningful for the ordered things that have come into existence made of the matter in the universe. Because what happens in our bodies and what happens on this planet is information based. Our bodies, the elements of our bodies exchange, the cells and there's a lot of exchange of information that keeps our bodies going. And obviously civilization, there's a lot of exchanges of information that keep civilization going. So you've got information being contained and exchanged within the universe for the operation of the universe. If the universe is kind of this massive computer-like thing that processes information for its own purposes, on the one hand, And then the universe is a world with space, time, and matter, where order evolves from this matter, and you have, systems that process information based on matter behaving like matter. So I would guess that you need a certain amount of slop, of non-specificity, of a holographicness. I hate the whole concept of holography, but I think there's some slop that I think you need that kind of slopped around information for the universe to work on its two levels: information for the universe's sake and information for our sake. The end.
There's this. What the bleep do we know?
Yeah.
Have we talked about it?
No, it's some kind of documentary deal.
Mm-hmm. It's that combines interviews, and it's a connection between quantum physics. It's a narrative that poses a spiritual connection between quantum physics and consciousness, and it follows fiction. How do you feel about that?
I don't like it a lot. I feel like people tend to want to make a connection between quantum processes and consciousness because they're both a little hocus pocusy and mysterious, and people like to, consciousness is this thing that seems to have some kind of hidden element that we haven't deciphered yet. Mm-hmm. And then quantum phenomena seem mysterious.
Can you define it? Define quantum physics.
Quantum physics is the behavior of matter at very small scales of space and time, to the point where if you get down small enough in space and time, shit's fuzzy, is imprecisely defined. The wavelength of an object, that is the wobble and the fuzziness in space of an object, is inversely proportional to its mass. So the standard example is a baseball has, like 10 to the 26th atoms in it, maybe. And it's very precisely, where the fucking baseball is. It's fucking there. But if you pulled like an atom out of the baseball, that atom would have a certain fuzziness where you wouldn't be able to pin it down as precisely, say, as the whole fucking baseball. And that's the deal, that on small scales, shit is fuzzy and can behave in non-local ways, for instance. Like, the famous example is the two-slit experiment, where you can set up an experiment where you punch two holes in a piece of paper, and you have a flashlight set up, and then you have a screen on the other side of the piece of paper with the holes in it, and you can set up your flashlight so it only spits out like one photon every few seconds. And when light goes through both holes at once, it interferes with itself. It sets up an interference pattern that shows that light is going through both holes at once. You'll see the interference pattern on the screen behind the piece of paper. And then what gets weird with quantum mechanics, and it's not really weird, it's just we call it weird because it's not a macroscopic kind of deal, and because quantum mechanics is newish. But anyway, if you can set up your flashlight so it only shoots one photon, one particle of light at a time, but you'll still get the interference pattern, which means that each particle of light, each bullet of light, is going through both holes at once, which is fucking weird because it's a motherfucking bullet of light, and it's going. And you could make this. You could do it with 4 holes or 8 holes or whatever, an arbitrary number of holes. If you don't have a detector on the holes to see which hole it went through, then each photon will go through all the holes at once, and the photon, the bullet, will interfere with itself. So, it's like a rat, like going through 8 holes at once. Like, what the fuck? It's one rat. What's the fucking deal? And the deal is that if you don't have quantum mechanics is the math of how things work when you have incomplete information. And in the case of the sheet with holes in it, the missing information is which hole it went through. Because you haven't put detectors on each of the holes to say, hey, a photon went through here. And if you don't pin the photon down by putting a detector on each hole, then the photon will go through all the holes. If you put detectors on all the holes, the interference pattern will disappear because now you've pinned the photon to a hole. It has to go through one of the holes and set off a detector. So quantum mechanics is the math of what happens to stuff when that stuff has incomplete information, when the universe has incomplete information about the stuff in it. Which means the stuff itself has incomplete information about where it is and where everything else is.
And lastly, do you believe in the concept of evil? Like there's a devil and...
Yeah, all right, so I believe that, that there's a certain view of science, of the world, a sciencey view of the world that originated in the 20th century, that really got going in the 20th century, that everything is the product of random processes, that the universe doesn't give a fuck about anything, and that nothing matters, that everything's just random action. But that's, I believe, a naive point of view, because what happens is the universe may not give a shit about what happens to the matter within it, and may not even have an idea that it consists of matter, but order arises over time in the universe, and that order embodies values, order over chaos. And you can begin to draw ethical conclusions from based on what persists over time. And I believe that that you can argue that processes that lead to increasing order, increasing complexity, and such are good, and processes that are corrosive are bad. So yeah, I do believe in the concept of evil. I think it takes some arguing to get there, but it takes some arguing to get there in any kind of philosophy. So there you go.
Lance, you wanted to comment on that? We've talked about heaven.
Does evil exist?
Lance has never talked about evil. We've talked about heaven a lot and spirituality, but we've never. Do you believe in the devil, Lance?
I do. What Rick is describing a minute ago, I was only is that a lot of scientists say that inevitably human beings will begin to cooperate, and those things which promote better lives for more people, or those systems that are more successful, will become morality. And I don't believe that. I don't think it was I don't think that there's an evolution explanation for morality. The idea that the people with the bad philosophies just die out, or somehow people drop those things by the wayside, and that it's just inevitable that we come up with a system of how to treat one another based on fear of one another, or based on I don't want my neighbor to to steal my lawnmower, so I promise not to steal his, because what that is I think there's more to it than that. And actually there are a lot of implications to the philosophical point that Rick is making. For example, it leads to the questions about something called situational ethics. Situational ethics it's the Bronze Age. There's only one river. Two groups of people from two tribes arrive at the river, and there's only enough water for one tribe. One tribe will completely annihilate the other tribe. Today, there's enough water for everyone. And so it turns out that in most, I think, reasonable ways of estimating it, Americans are actually the nicest people. We do the most niceness to one another, but also we have the least reason not to, because there's so much opportunity and so much wealth that, why wouldn't we be the nicest people? So if you really want to know who are good people, there's an issue of, should you go to a place like, in the most war-torn, famine, disease-ridden area of Africa, and see who is sacrificing themselves for who else? Who is able to rise above tribal identification? So there's that question too. There's the question of, are good people good because they're in circumstances where they have no reason not to be good? Or are good people good because they've overcome temptation and are willing to sacrifice themselves more? So there are a lot of implications to what Rick was bringing up, which is it's all based on personal interest. People are doing what they have to do. People are doing what they do in order to cooperate. So I think that the way I look at it is, as I've gotten older, I have found that people need to be taught values. So, yes, it's true that people today are the least likely ever to have black slaves, right? That 200 years ago seemed like a reasonable thing. That was kind of the way everybody lived, and so people had black slaves. Today, it's unthinkable. Today, it would be unthinkable to exterminate people in your country, in Europe, because they had a different religion. It's unthinkable. But to people 1,000 years ago, it wasn't such a bad idea. But I also think that can they hear me? I also think that when you don't teach people values, because I'm an old man, I know that if you don't teach people values, they won't get values. So even in the richest, most advanced country in the world, I think that there is a need to teach the most basic values. Because if you don't, people will do bad things. I mean, for example, there's a lot of confusion about pornography, I've noticed. Almost everybody watches pornography, or, maybe they don't want to, but somehow they've seen it, and people are very open-minded about it. Now, that's because the society hasn't made a clear decision about it. So if this society says that we don't want pornography, it's bad. If we make a decision amongst ourselves, then it will become bad. But we have to teach that to ourselves. Or we can have the debate and decide it's good. But my point is that people do slip into values that really don't make any sense at all. When did it become a good idea to watch films of other people having sex? When did we have that discussion? So, in short, I think that an advanced society will have more moral behavior because it's easier to be moral, but at the same time, an advanced society still needs to teach values to itself and re-examine values and see if certain things need to be reformed, or we will lose values.
Okay, which makes me want to talk about TV. Because Carol and I watched a series called I Am Not Okay With This on Netflix. Really good series, set in high school, about a girl who is faced with various challenges. It's like everything, it's a pretty fucked up show in a lot of ways. And shows like Mad Men, Breaking Bad, The Wire, The Sopranos, all the great shows of the past 10 years have had morally compromised heroes. Fucked up heroes, anti-heroes, who sometimes do, BoJack Horseman, who sometimes do the right thing and sometimes do horrible things. And we're in the middle of, I would say, a TV renaissance. It's like living in 15th century Florence, Italy, except with TV. There's just greatness all around us. But can we learn moral behavior from TV that has fucked up heroes? And I'd say yeah, because the alternative, at least in my lifetime of TV experience, is the shitty TV of the 60s and 70s and 80s that presented stories with more moral clarity, that tried to teach morals, right? The moral of the story is.
Yeah, sure.
But a lot of those fucking shows were terrible to the point where you couldn't really, A, the lessons were simplistic, and B, the shows were just done badly, and it made you want to say fuck you to the shows, right? Is that a fair?
A lot of them, yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'd say that somehow, with these more morally, shit, I touched my face again, ambiguous shows, somehow I think we're, I don't know, learning, like some of the shit that you're talking about, from some of the grottiest TV characters, we somehow pick up values. Like nobody, I mean, I love BoJack Horseman, but BoJack is this alcoholic horse man who has done a bunch of really terrible stuff. And I'm very sympathetic to the guy, but the guy is a bastard. And somehow, that has added to my moral framework.
There's a philosopher named Carol K. Anthony, and one of the things she says is that whenever we watch a film or a movie or read a book, we are presented with values of the various characters and the character, the moral or message of the story. And what she says is that if you immediately recognize that something's absurd, you reject it and it has no effect on you. But if you don't immediately recognize it, if you're actually kind of, if you don't really examine what the messages are, and you sort of, then in a way you blandly accept it, and it slips into your behavior. So that's what I think's happening today a lot of the time. I think that we went from a very predictable world of morals from culture. From now on, I'm going to say culture instead of books, films, and TV, where culture was constantly reinforcing things that were very predictable. And people got
Magnum's going to get the bad guy at the end of the show.
right. And furthermore, that each character is going to be good and do the right thing under every circumstance. And that got a little boring for people. And now we're presented with a lot of characters and a lot of shows that do the wrong thing. And we are sort of presented them in an understandable light and in morally ambiguous situations. My concern is that the extreme we're in now is probably worse, coupled with the absolute complete decline of religion. People are doing crazy things that we didn't think before. I think the school shootings. Since when do people shoot people that are total strangers when they're mad at their dad? Since when do people lop the arms off of statues? You can't keep a statue in a park in the United States anymore. Well, in the 19th century, every single park in Europe, every square, every building had a beautiful statue. I mean, the 19th century was called the Gilded Age for a reason.
Well,
The late the turn of the century.
it was called the Gilded Age because it was an age of gilded means not really gold, just covered with a light coating of gold. Like gilded means bullshit.
Well, it has come to mean that, but
It meant that at the time too.
well,
It was fancy, but bullshit fancy. Fancy, but bullshit fancy.
but my point is that there was a lot to be learned.
There was pretty shit all over the place.
Yeah, so all over everything, people tried to make things beautiful, and people didn't vandalize them. You could put a marble statue in a park, and it would stay there. Everyone would respect it. It would never occur to anybody to destroy it. And now you can't do that anywhere. You put a marble statue up anywhere, and the people will destroy it. So that, along with a whole host of other behaviors. If you look at, in the 1950s, the thing that teachers most complained about with students was that the students, I think, chewed gum. There's a famous article about this where they did a survey of what teachers are most upset about. And being late, not doing your homework, chewing gum, that talking back, to the teacher were terrible. And now they did the same survey, and it's raping the teacher, beating the teacher up, bringing an Uzi to class, possibly shooting people, bringing knives. So clearly we have not been teaching values, and I don't think there's any question about that.
Well, I would argue, tangentially, that I think that Americans have become less generous. I don't know about the rest of the world, but I think social media over-empowers us, reinforces how wonderful each of us is. Because, I can go on Twitter, and I can just type out the most ridiculous bullshit, the laziest, and I can get positive reinforcement for it as many times a day as I want, within reason. Because I've done so much tweeting that I've exhausted people who follow me to the point where I don't get that many likes per tweet. But still, you can go on your phone, and you've got your peer group, and you can just you're in constant contact with your peeps, and you're just having fun with a constant stream of personalized information. And I think to some extent, it makes you feel like you're hot shit.
Actually, I'm on Facebook, and I'm not on Twitter, and I've learned the opposite. What I have found is that what I do on Facebook is I post my paintings. And I have found a very clear correlation that the better the paintings, the more likes I get. And artists that aren't very good don't get very many likes. There are some artists that are highly promoted, they're famous, and they always get a lot of likes. But among normal artists, you get a pretty fair idea of where you stand.
Well, okay, so I wasn't entirely accurate. I agree with you. If I put up a fucking great tweet, then I'll get a lot of likes. If I put up a shitty tweet, then no. One of the tweets I was proudest of during coronavirus was, that I inform people that due to the coronavirus situation, I will be working from home ever since I was fired in 2014. I got a lot of likes because it's a decent fucking.
I think your stripper name bears repeating.
Pandemic, yeah. Well,
that's for the street. You didn't set it up very well for a professional comedian. During the
drag queen name.
The stripper
drag queen name.
for the coronavirus epidemic. Now I'm ruining the joke. For this era, the stripper name will be Pandemic.
Real quick, I was watching a documentary on Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah.
What is your take on Linda Ronstadt?
She had a full life in music. Now she has what, MS? No,
Parkinson's.
Parkinson's. So she can't sing anymore because it's affected her voice. But I don't know, in the 70s, she was a good singer and she was super cute and she was dating Jerry Brown back when he was governor the first time and when he had hair. So together they were cute. And I don't know, it was part of the, back then he was called Governor Moonbeam because he had a lot of like really idealistic plans, right? For everything.
Well, some people thought they were kooky plans.
Yeah, but okay, so Moonbeam. So like idealistic, kooky, and like, but that was all part of, some of the 70s was very optimistic. We'd thrown the evil Richard Nixon out of office. And the Vietnam War had come to the end, ended, and everybody was at the disco and doing coke and having lots of crazy sex, or so I read, not being one of the people having sex. And it just seemed like a fun time where, leading to a future where people would continue to have fun and have sex.
I would just like to say about Linda Ronstadt, I recently heard a song by her, and she had a great voice. And she did a few really good songs. I mean, really good songs.
Blue Bayou?
There was Blue Bayou and what's the one? I think I've been love you for a long, long time. What was that song called?
I've been mistreated.
Yeah. Anyway, Linda Ronstadt was a genuine talent. She had a great voice, and in my old age, I've come to be a connoisseur of voices, of singing. I used to be just, if I like the song, I like the song. But now I actually listen to the voice, and I've noticed that there's a lot to it. I mean, I never really understood how important the character of the voice and the technical ability of the voice was, but a great singer is very rare. And I also have something interesting to add that I did not know. It turns out that with proper exercise, you can actually develop a good voice. Maybe not a world-class voice, but you can definitely go from not being able to sing to being able to sing pretty well if you're really serious about practicing and doing the right exercises. So that's a great thing.
All right, what else we got, or should we wrap it up?
Just real quick, Benjamin Netanyahu, do you have any comments in terms of what's going on in Israel right now?
Well, Lance knows 50 times more, as much stuff about Israel as I do. But your information comes from a conservative point of view. The little I know about Netanyahu is, I mean, he's been prime minister of Israel for how many terms? Like a shitload, 5 terms?
I think it's been over 10 years.
A long
maybe much
time.
longer.
At the same time, he's a conservative strong man, where he governs conservatively, and he also is loose with his behavior to the point that you could argue, being conservative, that it's his opponents who are trying to take him down. But he's been charged with illegal corruption. Now, and so I don't know. I mean, he just seems to me, in my ignorance, I just think he's like one more facet of the Trump era.
Well, one of the things that last few weeks I've been getting very angry with Rick because, not because of his beliefs, but because he is well informed. He's very well informed. He knows exactly what the leftists want him to think. His argument has always been, I don't know anything. But the truth is that because he doesn't get as much, he doesn't listen to the radio all day like I do and hear constant streams of information. But the truth is he does get the information they want. They want him to hate Israel. And if one of the reasons to hate Israel is because Netanyahu, you've got to hate Netanyahu if you're a Democrat. In fact, it looks like Jews that love Israel are turning against the Democrats. This week, Bernie Sanders held a rally where he embraced physically Representative Omar of, I think she's from Minnesota, yeah. And her platform is to simply destroy Israel. She despises Israel. She said anti-Semitic things, and she supports something called the Boycott, Divest, and Sanction movement, which would basically strangle Israel economically and destroy it, the same way that South Africa was overturned. And Sanders physically embraced her. Of all the Congress people he could have gone to have a meeting with. So Sanders not only embraced her, somebody that wants to destroy Israel, but Sanders went ahead and said that Israel is a racist state. Israel is racist. So he's an evil man, but most Democrats are on his side now. It turns out that whether he wins the nomination is up for, who knows? I mean, the odds are against him, but he's got a good chance. He's only a little behind Biden. And he's got massive support among Democrats who apparently are not bothered by him embracing someone that wants to destroy Israel.
Well, he doesn't have that much of a chance. According to 538,
Okay.
he's got an 8. Biden has.
Well, he won California.
Yeah, but
So apparently among California Democrats, destroying Israel is not such a bad thing.
well, all right. So
Well, wait, I'm not done.
No,
I'm
let
not
me
done.
say.
I didn't get to say anything about Netanyahu. All right, go ahead.
All right,
Talk.
one quick thing, which is when I say I don't know anything, what I mean is I know some stuff, but I recognize that what you need, that I know not enough, that there's a lot to know about a lot of situations. Israel, for instance, and the Palestinians, and that I don't know anywhere near enough about it to really speak authoritatively.
Yeah, I realize that, and that's nice that you say that. But I also always find that you do know if there's. You may only know one paragraph, but that's the paragraph the Democrats want you to know. So they got you. So if they say that Netanyahu is a very bad man, then that's what you just reported. See, listen to what you said about Netanyahu. You said he was a corrupt strongman.
Well, no,
It sounds terrible.
Yeah, but I said but I said that you would argue that
Well, fuck what I would argue.
Yeah, but then
fuck what I would argue. My point is that they asked you what you thought about him, and you repeated apparently what Democrats think, that Netanyahu is corrupt.
But at the same time,
Do you think Netanyahu is corrupt?
Probably. Do I think that he's corrupt to the point where he should be found guilty? I don't know, because like I said, I don't know. But
because the Democrats wanted you to hate Netanyahu.
Yeah,
and you do. They wanted you to, so you do.
Well, do you think that it's a slam dunk that he hasn't committed any acts of corruption?
Yeah, I think he's being lied about by the left wing in his country, which are just as big liars as they are in America.
Yeah, so.
They lied about Trump and they lied about Netanyahu. And what is happening right now, I need to finish a point.
Okay,
you can interrupt me if you want, but if there's something you want to say.
No, I said what I needed to say.
What is happening is Trump is the most pro-Israel president we've ever had. And what he has done is he's basically said to Netanyahu, what do you want to do? You've had problems with the Palestinians since 1948. So what do you want to do, Benjamin Netanyahu? And Netanyahu is telling Trump, this is what I want to do. And for the first time, thank God, we have a president, President Trump, who is completely on Israel's side. He's basically saying, look, this war has to end. And the way we're going to end the war with the Arabs is we're going to let Israel win. See, people don't know that American foreign policy has always had this Middle Eastern policy, has always thrown a bone to the Palestinians to sort of indicate to them, maybe you've got a side. And instead of making things more fair, what it's really done is just perpetuate Palestinian hopes that somehow they can destroy Israel. That if they just turn American public opinion against the Jewish state, maybe somehow they can get in there. And American presidents have been very coy about that. And so what's happening right now is Trump is saying, look, the Israelis are right. We're going to let them do what they need to do to settle the issue and say, these are our borders. If they need to annex some territory, they're going to do it, and then that'll be it. And the Palestinians, the Trump administration has given the Palestinians 3 or 4 months to come back with a counter proposal on his last proposal. If they don't come back with something, that's it. It's over. No more negotiating, no more talking. You either compromise, or we're just going to say that Israel has whatever territory they think they deserve.
All right, so let me say a couple things. One,
hold
on. Director, why did you even ask about this stuff?
In terms of Netanyahu?
Yeah.
Oh, because it's been in the news lately.
Okay, so let me say what I know as a liberal, that I know that here's what I think, that Palestinian leadership, for as long as I've been paying attention to Palestine, the little amount that I pay, has always been terrible, corrupt, and dedicated to wiping out Israel, and just only pretending to want to have a settlement, right?
Yeah.
All right. But that the Americans, as we try to help them reach a settlement, have entertained the legitimacy of that leadership, because if you're going to negotiate with the Palestinians, who are you going to negotiate with? Their leadership, even though you think their leadership is sucky. And what you're saying is that that Trump does away with the pretense of that.
Well, there are 3 or 4 things, unless you have something to add.
Well, just that it seems like, I mean, you'd agree with me that the Palestinians live under horrible conditions. And we probably,
Well, the reason...
I know that the reason they do is there are a bunch of reasons, but one of the reasons is that their leadership is shitty.
Well, they get huge amounts of money from a variety of countries, which the leaders just keep. I think Arafat, who was a famous Palestinian leader, died with something like $30 billion in a Swiss bank account. That could have been divided up among a very small Palestinian population and been very good for them. And I've spoken with Palestinians that agree with what I just said. 2 things. The Trump administration has recognized Israel's right to their capital city being Jerusalem, and their right to hang on to territory that they captured from Syria called the Golan Heights, because they needed to capture it because the Syrians were firing missiles at them from those heights. So it's a good solid little swath of territory in Syria. No American president had the gumption, the wisdom to just say, look, that's it. We're not going to fool around anymore. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. The Golan Heights belongs to Israel. They want it fair and square. And we're going to give the West Bank to the Palestinians in a form that they're going to have to accept. And if they can't accept it, then that's it. There's no more negotiation. So in other words, there are constant arguments over how much of the West Bank the Palestinians should get. And Trump has finally said, this is how much we will agree to give you. And that's it. Now, for those of you watching this, and I would say probably 98% of you, you don't know what started the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I'm just going to tell you what it was. Briefly, in 1948, the territory that is now Israel was cut off from a large territory called Transjordan. Transjordan was a piece of the Turkish Empire. And the Turkish Empire dissolved, and this portion was cut out of the Turkish Empire, and 1/3 of it was given to the Jews. The other 2/3 was given to the Arabs. And the international bodies that were, trying to work the situation out thought that that was fair. The Jews thought it was fair. So,
this wouldn't have happened at all.
Stop interrupting me, for God's sake.
Can I say one thing?
No, you've interrupted me 6 times. I have to finish my point. I'll start again. This is why I yell. Stop interrupting me. Stop interrupting me. Fuck. I said I wasn't going to yell. All right. So, the Jews got 1/3 of the land. The Arabs got 2/3. Their 2/3 became Jordan. Unfortunately, the Arabs wanted the other third as well. They don't want there to be the Jewish third at all. And that's the problem. And if you don't believe me, and I had to debate an Arab woman about this once, I said to her, look, it's in the Palestinian charter. There is a charter. There is a declaration, a constitution of the Palestinians. The Hamas charter. Hamas runs one of the Palestinian territories. And it says, we will destroy Israel. There will be no Israel. So that's the problem. The Jews were happy with taking 1/3 of the land, and the Arabs want all 3/3. So all Trump and Netanyahu are trying to say is, you get the other 2/3, now leave Israel alone.
So the reason that Israel, the Jews isn't part of this land at all, you can tell me if I'm wrong, is because everybody felt really bad because during World War II, Hitler slaughtered fucking all the Jews, right?
Okay, that's a bad argument. And the reason is that what the Arabs will then say is, well, why punish Arabs by giving them, why not give the Jews part of Germany?
Yeah, but in practical terms, it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for World War II, right?
Well, see, that's the other problem. It turns out that the population of Jerusalem, which is part of Israel, which is, the capital of Israel, was almost always predominantly Jewish. So for 1,000 years, for thousands of years, there have been the exact numbers of Jews in Jerusalem, nobody knows, but Jews were indigenous to the territory that is now Israel. Now, they were not as numerous as the Arabs, but there was a movement for Jews to go to Israel long before World War II.
Zionism.
Yeah, Zionism existed 25 years before World War II, and there were always
19th
Jews.
century.
Yeah, there were always Jews going to Israel. Their numbers were not as great, but neither were the Arab numbers. It turns out that when the Jews created a thriving community in Israel, they allowed Arabs to come in as workers, and the Arabs saw opportunity too, and both people's population increased, so the problem increased with it.
So in 48, the Jews have territory, and then the Jews declare themselves a nation, right? That's part of the
Yes.
deal, because Britain and the other powers didn't want that either, right? There was a whole deal.
No, there was a decision. The British, for some reason, the British opinion about this has always been very important, and I think the reason is because they wound up with that territory after they defeated the Turkish Empire. So they were sort of in control of Transjordan, and on numerous occasions, the British resolved that there should be an Israeli nation.
But Israel had to take there was a whole deal where
They resolved that it was right, but they didn't say they'd fight for it. So in other words, what the British did was they pulled out. And when they pulled out in 1948, the area collapsed into civil war between the Arabs and the Jews. The first country to recognize the legitimate right to existence of a Jewish state in Israel was the United States.
Who was the president?
Truman.
Truman.
And the second country was the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union thought that there was a possibility of communism in Israel.
the deal is now, today,
Russia.
there's no solution that each side would feel is fair.
Well, no, it looks like the Jews are going to get the solution they think is fair.
Yeah, but there's no solution that both sides think is fair,
Right,
and Trump is coming down on the side of the Jews.
Right, yeah, and as a result, I hope that this is the turning point where Jews begin to join the Republican Party.
But probably not, because 5/6 of Jews are still with the Democrats.
Well, 70% of all Jews vote Democrat, but it's changing. All the polls are showing that Jews are falling away from the Democrat Party. I hope that it's in huge numbers, but we'll see how smart Jews are. I don't know. I know a lot of Jews will not vote for Bernie Sanders.
I have a question. How is it that I mean, obviously, I mean, you look at in terms of like Nobel Peace Prize winners or Nobel winners, Jews lead the pack, right? I mean, it's obvious that they're
Which kind of Nobel Prize?
just Nobel prizes in general,
Yeah,
math
it's
and
mostly
science.
science. So
How is it that a group of folks, people, the Jewish, can be so brilliant and yet let themselves get exploited so much? Like, for example, in Nazi Germany. What is it?
I have an argument to
Okay.
make about that. I think it's crazy. It's numeric. Well, it's numerically. It's demographically convenient to be anti-Semitic, because how many Jews are there in the world? 15 million.
Something.
15 million. How many Muslims are there in the world? Like 1.8 billion. So if you're going to want to scapegoat a group of people who, on the average, are fairly successful throughout history, and not worry that you're going to get your ass kicked by a demographically superior force, then pick the Jews, because for every Jew, there are 1,000 Muslims. You go around saying it's the Muslims' fault, the Muslims are going to kick your ass because there's a shitload of Muslims. The Jews, they're in teeny numbers, so you can go ahead and push them around. Is that a reasonable argument?
It's an argument, but it doesn't address his question.
Like, why are Jews successful? Well, some of it is that, maybe...
He actually asked a very interesting question. If Jews were so smart, why did they get annihilated so many times in history, particularly in World War II?
In World War II, they were the victims, like today, I would argue, that people are manipulated to some extent by new media, social media. We know from 2016 that you can target people, based on what you've learned about what they put online.
No, but he's not asking he's not asking why the Germans would want to kill them.
How?
He's asking.
And I'm getting to that,
Oh,
because the fucking Germans.
I won't interrupt.
Well, that's okay. No, the Germans were pioneers of they kind of. At World War II, the art of advertising was fairly young. If you look at advertising from like 1920, it was really stupid. It's like, it's a lady on the phone going, "I can't believe how good these muffins are, Jan." Right? There was no sophistication. The Germans came in, but advertising was getting more sophisticated. The Germans came along and they used sophisticated propaganda. They tricked the fuck out of the Jews and a lot of other people they developed. People couldn't believe that a national government, one of the most one of the most advanced, culturally superior countries in the world, right? German culture
Right.
would all of a sudden turn homicidal and criminal and genocidal. And so like a lot of smart Jews got the fuck out, or just scared Jews. But some people stayed because they'd always been in Germany. They had roots, they had professional success, they had all their shit there. And they couldn't believe that the hammer was going to come down on them. And this was abetted by sophisticated German trickery.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that the Germans went to great lengths to hide what they were doing. So even during World War II, there were, even the people that were trying to destroy Hitler's Germany, for a long time had no idea what was happening.
Until people escaped and were like, and then made it somehow to
Right,
England and
right.
said, this is what is, they have death factories set up across the occupied areas.
Yeah, and if today people say, how could you not know? But we're talking about a continent, Europe, where nothing like that had happened for hundreds of years or thousands of years. I mean, they'd had, bloody wars, but there was chivalrous traditions. And so, first of all, it was a new thing.
Cookies.
So it was a new thing. And secondly, the Germans didn't do this randomly. They sat down and planned very carefully how they were going to trick people into going to these camps willingly. They told them it was going to be a work camp.
Resettlement. You're going to get a little. You're going to be farming. You're going to be helping, yourselves and the country. And they have people send They force people to write postcards. Said having a great time at this fucking camp. Looking forward to you.
Yeah. And actually, one of the most chilling postcards that, if you were lucky, your relative would send a postcard saying, I am going to meet your Aunt Sally. And the receiver of the postcard would know that Aunt Sally's dead, from 5 years ago from pneumonia, and say, well, if this person's going to go meet Aunt Sally, I better not go to this camp.
Now, also, I don't know if this is a legend or if this actually happened, but sometimes they say, look at this, add this stamp to your collection. And then they'd steam off the stamp off the postcard, and under the stamp would be a little teeny written message that says they're killing the fuck out of us.
Yeah, and another thing that people don't remember is that in those very same camps, the Nazis killed 3 million Soviet army troops. And these Russian troops, they knew they were going to get killed. So you knew if you got captured by the Germans, there was a 99% chance that they were going to kill you. So they, along with the 6 million Jews, they killed 3 million soldiers of the Soviet army.
And 5 million other people considered undesirable by the Nazis.
Yeah, but my point is to answer his question. Once the Germans got a hold of you, whether your IQ didn't matter. They, so a lot of people ended up being killed in those camps.
Plus there was denial, I'm sure.
Well, there are two other issues that I didn't bring up, and that is when the Jews actually figured out what was happening, and they had managed to get access to guns, they started the Warsaw Uprising, where they fought the Germans. And I'm not trying to support the Jews. I'm just trying to answer this question. Once they figured out, they did rebel, and they held out, and the Warsaw Ghetto held out longer than France. They fought like desperate people.
We know that if you get a time machine and you go back and you give Jews guns starting on Kristallnacht, they kill the shit out of Nazis.
I've always felt that
Science.
And see how you all respond to this. That like you look at the Jews that are super liberal, and I feel like the Jews that are liberal really in their heart are liberal in the sense they stand up for the little guy and they're compassionate. Could that be something where just inherently Jewish folks, they're super brilliant and smart, but they also have a great heart and it's almost like they see man as at the good natured part, so when confronted by people that are evil and are sneaky, are vulnerable to that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's pre-World War II Jews who believe in civilization, and then there's post-World War II Israelis who, when they run moving companies in America, they will beat the shit out of your stuff, and they will say, you're not getting your shit back unless you pay us another $1,200.
Well, I mean,
Jews who have learned their lesson.
Well, what the director is asking is, do people with high IQs, can they be naive? Mm-hmm. So I think there's a direct. I think that people with high IQs are not necessarily wise, and very often they are naive about human motives. And so if you were living in Germany at the time,
yeah, that's not to say that the Jews.
Please don't interrupt me. If you were living in Germany at the time, you would not understand why Germany would not make good use of all the Jews that could have been working to help the war effort. Like, why not put them in a camp and have them build tanks? Why not use their scientists to build better weapons? The Jews were too logical to realize that the Nazis were not rational people. They wanted to kill them because they were crazy.
The World War II was lost from 1942 on, right?
Well, I mean,
The
there are turning points: Stalingrad, Battle of Midway.
All right, but say 1943. From 1943,
No, it depends on where.
it was lost for the last 2 years. The German generals, the German high command knew they were fucked.
Right.
Right, but still, during this period when they knew they would lose, they redoubled their effort to kill Jews.
Yeah.
It served no strategic purpose. The cause was lost. They had the Wannsee Conference, right?
The Wannsee Conference was the beginning of the final solution.
Okay, but they had other conferences.
That conference was at the height of the war, where the war could have gone either way.
Okay, but still later they got killier of the Jews after the war was lost. They're like, all right, we're not going to win the war, but at least we can kill Jews. That's so crazy because what's the fucking point? It's just like, I mean, Hitler, he was addicted to speed, they think, right?
Yeah.
All right, so like Hitler's brain was like, just, he was fucked up. He was a fucking speed freak lunatic who, he got his hands on the levers of government, and when he was a cleverish guy, and then he held on to the controls as he descended into pure genocidal fucking shittiness.
Yeah. So they actually diverted things from fighting in order to kill more Jews, because you're right. They actually said, well, we may lose the war, but we're going to kill off all the Jews. And they very nearly did. They killed 1/3 of all Jews.
It's been reported that the New York Times suppressed a lot of this. Do you have any?
Yeah, the New York Times did 2 evil things. The first evil thing they did was to report that Stalin was a leader that was the leader of a great and successful experiment. They had a reporter go to Stalinist Russia, and Stalin killed as many Russians as the Germans did, but he did it just to establish the power of the Communist Party.
And because he was a crazy fucker too.
Well,
he killed people well beyond the need to kill everybody.
Well, I also think every communist country does this, but the New York Times sent a correspondent that was the main purveyor of information from the Soviet Union to the U.S., and that correspondent was very positive about the Soviet Union. He said things are going very well in the midst of all the slaughter. Then a few years later, during World War II, the New York Times knew that the Holocaust was taking place, but chose not to report about it.
Has anybody tried to explain why?
No one has ever held them to account. There are some people that say that the New York Times, because it was run by Jews, didn't want to appear to be partial to Jewish problems. But
is there a book people can read about this shit?
yeah, there are a lot of books on it. Mark Levin
Well, no, come on.
wrote the best book about all the things. He wrote a book about the press. I don't know the name of the book, but
On freedom of the press.
Thank you. He wrote a book about all the terrible things that the New York Times did. They really don't deserve to be the paper of record. They've been a force for evil in America since their inception.
Except Mark Levin is super conservative, so it would be nice to have a not super conservative book that covers some of the same
You
shit.
just told me what they said. You yourself just told me that they didn't cover the Soviet gulags or
no,
the
I
Holocaust.
didn't. No, you said it. I didn't say it.
You said, didn't they underreport the Holocaust?
No, our director did. I didn't say it.
I'm sorry. Well, you know what? There's two of us here that know that they did that. The fact that you don't know doesn't mean that I'm lying.
No, but still, it would be nice to, because...
Why does there have to be a conservative view, or a liberal view? Either it happened or it didn't happen, Rick.
No, but the...
Did the New York Times write fairly about the oppression of the Soviet system?
No.
Well, then what difference does it make if Mark Levin is conservative?
No, because if you take the whole Mark...
Facts are facts.
Yeah, but, like, I don't know what the rest of the Mark Levin book is. Like...
They may say things that will affect the minds of your other drones and zombies.
Because the New York Times is not purely shit. The New York Times has been around for I don't know how many fucking years and has done stuff that hasn't sucked, I would think.
Any newspaper that covers up the mass murder of Stalin and Hitler is not it no longer has moral credibility, regardless of what other things they've done. That's it. It's over. Should have been shut down decades ago.
See, because that's a Mark Levin view.
And they convinced Rick that Trump colluded with Russia.
Well, I don't want to have this argument, but let me just say, I'm going to disagree with you, but let's not.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, since you believe in the New York Times, do you know that I'm saying it again, the New York Times about 6 months ago actually wrote that the dossier was probably Russian disinformation.
Okay. But, and I've got my own problems with it. Liberals have their own problems with the New York Times. Like that we don't have to have an argument about this. That the New York Times spent so many column inches. A column inch is an inch, an article might be 10 column inches. It's whatever the width of a column times 10 inches tall. It spent, thousands of column inches on Hillary's emails, which pisses off liberals because they consider it, we don't have to argue about whether it was an issue or not. But anyway, people have problems with the New York Times. But anyway, we have one more. Let's just do one more thing. Let's do Biden and then let's fucking wrap it up. Okay,
yeah,
so.
well,
All right.
We've gone like 3 hours, right? So yeah, you're right now.
Just fucking Biden's going to be the nominee. 538, which is a pretty good probability aggregator kind of thing, says chances are 8 out of 9 he's going to be the Democratic nominee. And then people on Twitter and elsewhere say, well, since he's going to be the nominee, then it's going to be, from the other side, it's going to be 24/7 Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden is losing it and shouldn't be president. That's each side tries to tear down the other side, and then my side is going to, for every Hunter Biden that you throw at us, we're going to try to throw, Jared Kushner, Ivanka, Don Jr. and Eric back at you with the millions that they've made off of business deals while Trump is... So anyway, this... I don't know. Do we have to fucking... also the Joe... people are going to argue that Joe Biden is losing it. Our side is going to argue that, he's always been a gaffe machine, that he's no more gaffy now than he has ever been, and that some of what looks like gaffes is his study. And I would argue furthermore that we've had presidents who have been kind of losing it, that you could argue the last 3 years of Reagan, but that Reagan was still an effective president because he appointed people who helped him be effective, even if he was in the early stages of whatever of the Alzheimer's that would later take him. And really, he wasn't that fucked up in the last 3 years of his presidency. He was, he had some good. He was able to withdraw from public life in what year? Do you remember? I don't know, but 3 years after he was president or more, he said, "Look, I've got this Alzheimer's, and I have to withdraw from public life." So he had his shit together enough that, or as people, that he still could do that years after leaving the president. Anyway, if Biden is a little bit less sharp than he was, it might not be horrible if he's able to appoint people who follow the policies that I, as a liberal, like.
My response is that it's typical Democrat dishonesty to simply say that the situation with Hunter Biden is mirrored by all of Trump's kids. The situation is that Hunter Biden was Joe Biden's son, and he has made millions and millions. He's not a qualified man. He's had no success in business. He was kicked out of the Naval Reserve for being a drug addict. And he's managed to make millions from the countries that Biden has been negotiating with. Whenever Biden had power, was the point man, either in China, or the Ukraine, and there are other countries. So what the Republicans are going to do is they are going to show this tape where Joe Biden is called, where Joe Biden forced the Ukrainians to fire the prosecutor in the Ukraine that was investigating his son, Hunter Biden, for corrupt practices with Ukrainian companies.
Burisma.
Yeah. We could go on. No, don't interrupt me. Now, there is no parallel. There is no parallel with anything that Trump and his kids have done. You can say that and hope that dumb people believe you, but you've got to be able to prove that. And unfortunately, there is now an investigation in the Ukraine, in the United States Senate, and we have videotapes on our side. And you've got nothing but, well, what about Trump's kids? That's the first issue.
All right.
I'm not finished.
How many issues you got?
I'm not finished. So the second point I wanted to make is that that's not what my issue is with Biden. My issue with Biden is the same thing I said last week. And I have brought this issue up with hundreds of Democrats, and not a single one can deal with it because you can't change reality. Biden was the point man that engineered the pullout from Iraq that led to the deaths of 250,000 people. And I don't care what his opinion is about health care, global warming, education. I care that Rick is willing to vote for a guy that got 250,000 people killed. To me, because I'm not an ignorant person, because I'm a well-educated and I think wise person, my values are that I will never vote for a man that got 250,000 people killed. So that's my issue. Now, as far as him being gaffe prone and senile, yes, he is. Yeah, those were my issues, Rick.
All right, so Hunter Biden did have some business success. Hunter Biden did get kicked, and he is a fuck up. But we don't have to have this full on deal because we've been going for fucking forever. But he's a fuck up. He failed a P test for probably cocaine, and got kicked out of the reserve shortly after signing up. But he did have a long history of being successful in business. But let's fucking wind it up because we've been going too long. And I'm going to look up Biden and the withdrawal from Iraq, and I believe that what I'll find is that what you're saying is true, because
he was the point man. In other words, Biden actually engineered it. It wasn't Obama walking over there and saying, "All right, let's do this." He actually sent Biden to deal with the Iraqi government, and it was Biden that came back and said, "Okay, we're going to pull. I recommend that we pull out. And this is how."
Okay.
I don't know how you can do it, Rick.
I honestly, but I'm going to do homework. What's the other thing?
What I said to Rick last week was, nothing that Trump has done has led to the deaths of 250,000 people.
Give him. I'm sorry, but I mean, anyway. Well,
No,
I hope it doesn't happen.
If you say give him time, that's not good enough.
I hope
you can't say I'll vote for the guy that actually did get 250,000 people killed because the other guy, I don't like him. He might do something bad. That's not logic, Rick. That's not scientific.
Well, anyway,
we
we've
get
got
a
to
reference to coronavirus if people die.
I hope not, but
Say it.
I don't know. And I don't want to actually. What's the other thing I'm supposed to do homework on?
No, I don't care what you do homework on.
All right, we're done. Fucking.
All right, long show. You guys, you know what? You see how hard we're working? We deserve to be supported. If you're watching this show every week, give us $5. We're poor people. We don't demand $1 million.
Get a shout out, right?
Yeah. So I don't want to give a shout out because people have been. We've gotten like $10 from a guy. I don't know if he wants people to.
No, that guy, M. Yeah, he doesn't want a shout out.
Okay. But anyway,
thank you anyway.
It's lancevsrick@gmail.com.
It's below
on
you.
PayPal.
It's below you.
And it's below you
On the YouTube.
on YouTube. Look down. All right. And Rick won't shake my hand.
I'll bump butts with you.
It's all right. Goodbye.
All right, bye.